Good evening, everyone. This is Ron. It's a little after 6. Uh, go ahead and get started. See if we have any questions. We had one we left yesterday with a question for Nick, but I want to first see if anybody else having a question because I think Nick's going to take a little while for us. But let's see if we have any questions first from anybody. I had someone to text me a question, and let's see. My question is about the solar eclipse and seeing it from a different mindset that we have been told. What spiritual energies are released that will benefit humanity? And looking at the eclipse without proper eyewear, does that cause blindness or is that a myth? So let's talk about the eclipse for a minute, and then I want to talk about a mindset. Okay, what is a mindset? Because that's one of those things that we talk about quite a bit. So, anybody, what are your thoughts on the eclipse?
Hey, this is Nick. Yeah, I have some. If no one else has any at the moment or any questions. Um, First off, about causing blindness, that's just the same as looking at the sun during the day. So the only reason they say that is because you're still looking at the sun. So if you're looking at the sun for too long, it'll hurt your eyes. That's the only reason. The metaphysical and spiritual nature of the eclipse is kind of like when we talk about standing in the gap or sort of bridging the gap between during a time of transition between a time of harmony and another time of harmony, where that gap or that transition is one that is more chaotic. An eclipse is like an example of that. It is a chaotic time and this does not necessarily mean that society is going to collapse during the eclipse. I mean, rather the physical manifestation of metaphysical and spiritual principle. It is a opportunity to remember the light that is within the self, that is the self, that stands in the gap or that bridges the gap to the next time of harmony. So metaphysically, spiritually, yes, there's much to go into in terms of the nature of what an eclipse is. But in terms of the basic idea, it is the opportunity to sort of let your light shine while it is dark outside. And that is a very simple way to explain that, I think, but that is essentially what is happening, I believe. And I'm not sure who all is on the phone. It's probably the same group of people, but yeah, for anybody who might not be on the weekends, my name is Nick. I used to teach or facilitate years and years ago. I'm still endeavoring to be on the phone on the weekends more as we go through 2024, because there is quite a lot, I think, that we're going to be introduced to and have to deal with on an individual and collective level. And it all relates to our spiritual development individually and collectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, any insight on the eclipse? Okay. Mindset. It's a term that we put out there quite a bit. We talk about mindsets quite a bit. And we have talked about having a different mindset growing into where we are right now. When I think of mindsets anyway, I think of those several things. One, I think about the things that I value. I think about attitude. I think about my way of thinking, the things that I desire, those kind of things. So when we talk about mindset and you look at the direction that America is going, or America has gone, and the whole world for that matter, you see a totally different things. Take the war for one in the Middle East, and the destruction and the loss of life, and that is certainly a different mindset than the course that we're on. So when we talk about mindsets, we talk about consciousness comes into play. Again, the things you value, how you think about things, how you see things, how you interpret things, and even what your expectations are. That's my take on that. But it was just one of those things that we say all the time, and it sounds very simple, but sometimes even the simple things need a little explanation. Anyone else? Or is there anything that you see differently with that? Okay.
I think mindset also speaks to what you're focused on. What gets your attention? What are the priorities during your thought process?
Yeah.
What have you set your mind to focus on? That kind of thing. And that in itself begins to determine, not begins to, but determines rather what your mindset actually is. What are your priorities? What's primary? Is it material or is it spiritual? If it's material, then what phases of that materialism that you're most focused on? Is it getting wealthy, or is it manipulating people? Or are you looking for prestige? Those kinds of things. I'm done.
Thank you, sir. And again, it's a term that comes up every time we talk, or has lately, and I just thought it may just put a little attention to it, so we'll all be on the same page. Thank you, Pastor. Anyone else? Okay. If there are no other questions get our attention, Nick, there was a question on the table for you yesterday. If you would please state the question as you remember it, or Richard can ask the question again, and we'll go into it from there.
Sure. The question was relating to soul groups, which is something that I mentioned on the weekend, I believe. But it was sort of everything related to that. What does that mean? How does that relate to what we talk about? How does that relate to what we see in the Bible, in the scripture, etc. But it was to explain more what that spiritual and metaphysical concept is, and how it relates to our experience. And that is again, the concept of a soul group, or a collective awareness that we are all part of. So that was what the question was about. And this may introduce some new concepts. As always, I do not speak, and do not ever want to speak, anything that I either do not know, as in do not or have not experienced myself, or do not understand myself as a result of examining my own experience, weighing it against my ability to know myself spiritually and to know the reality that we are part of, or weighing it against a source that I think is accurate as a result of it reflecting aspects of my own experience. That is to say, I do not bring that up out of nowhere. That is the concept of a soul group, I believe, and in my experience, is a real metaphysical and spiritual component of reality itself, of the being of the creator, itself, which forms the framework for reality itself. And these kinds of concepts maybe, if at any point, stop me and ask questions, because the direction we're headed in is even further removed from the traditional religious things we're accustomed to, especially having grown up in the context of Christianity in the South, in America. These things are, as we've been speaking about on the weekend, getting closer and closer, and well, further and further back in time, closer and closer to the sort of true metaphysical and spiritual origin of everything that we understand today to be religious. And all of the religious stuff that we recognize is a sort of de-evolution of original, much more sharp spiritual metaphysical teaching, which would have been present, which you would have gotten had you gone to a mystery school system in Egypt, for example, certainly at one point in time. So, yeah, stop me and ask questions. What we are going into, even moving forward in the future in general, is more and more related to these kinds of core metaphysical spiritual principles. These are parts of yourself, and the more you are able to sort of quiet the noise in your conscious and subconscious, the more you will be able to hear the information you are constantly receiving from your own spirit, from your own higher self. Both of those concepts relating also to this idea of a soul group, or a collective conscious awareness that we are all part of. So I say that I'm not trying to overcomplicate anything, but to explain every aspect of these things, it may get complicated. And
Excuse
to that
me.
end, yeah, please. Sure.
Nick, I need a little more understanding of soul group. Is that like the other day you mentioned that ultimately, like the shoehorn concept, horseshoe concept, that we're all trying to get back to where we're humans treating humans. We said we want the good for humanity. So
Yeah.
is that cry, that desire among individuals, whether they're aware of it or not, is that kind of the concept of the soul group?
It is very much part of that, yeah. And I'm going to get into the soul group in more detail, but
Okay.
that concept I was speaking specifically about sort of socially and politically, but yes, it is directly related to our underlying collective desire to be one again. And even in at the furthest extent of the extremes that we seek to go to out of our ignorance or whatever, eventually we arrive back at the same place. So it, in a horseshoe sense, it curves back around to where we started, even if we are unconscious of the fact that that is what is happening. If our desire is for ultimately the same thing, for our harmonious humanity, a harmonious nation made up of many peoples, but ultimately all collectively part of the same thing. And in terms of the awareness that we want to see awaken within people and within ourselves, it is that awareness of the thing that unifies all of us, despite apparent differences, despite material, physical, whatever differences. The thing that unifies all of us is the spirit, consciousness. It is the mind, capital M, as opposed to the sort of intellectual noise when we're usually talking about our mind on Saturday or Sunday. So I hope that helps. But yes, I will get into that soul group concept much more.
Where did that term come from, Nick? I'm
Soul
not
group,
familiar with
it's yeah,
it.
it's a general term. You will find it in a lot of what you might call new age spirituality writings. It's just a general term that you may find in a variety of places, but it's kind of like the term karma, in that it is you hear it everywhere, but it represents a true metaphysical and spiritual concept that is a sort of core foundation of the mystery that we are unfolding within ourselves. Yeah, I've mentioned this before. One of the greatest that I have ever found, greatest sort of metaphysical information sources is, it was originally channeled back in the 80s, and it's called the Law of One. You
Say
can
it
read
again.
the whole thing.
Say it one more
The
time.
Law of One.
Okay.
The Law of One. You can read the whole thing for free at lawofone.info. Lawofone.info. But I mentioned that with a not a warning, but with an understanding that there is no filler there. There is no hand holding. That is extremely dense metaphysical and spiritual information. There is no religious pretext. They will automatically start talking about things that come out of nowhere. But I put that out there as I have no qualms with anything that I've ever seen that is part of it. So these kinds of sources becoming available now in the time period that we live in are indicative of the true depth of the mystery that is becoming more available to us. That when we encounter it, when we read it, it can help awaken in turn the true depth of the nature of the self, of the spirit, that we are trying to connect to remember. So the Law of One is particularly important because the Law of One, as I said, it was channeled, as in a lady received this message from other realms, you could say. But the entities or the being speaking refers to itself as a social memory complex. Don't worry about that term. The entity speaking is a soul group, is a collective consciousness of multiple beings. And it calls itself Ra. So Ra, as we've been speaking about, is connected to the sun. And in this case, in the Law of One, which again, there's a bunch of books you can get, but you can read the whole thing for free, and you can even search by concept online at lawofone.info. All of this is related to Kemet. It is related to the nature of the destiny of all spiritually seeking beings. And it is related to the concept of the soul group, which I'm going to talk more about. Once again, that source, there is no hand-holding with that. There's all kinds of stuff in there. I'm not suggesting you immediately start going reading it, but I mean, you certainly can. But whatever you find in there, hey, I don't necessarily want to try to break down every single thing, because literally every other paragraph may be something that is new or strange. But anyway, it is a very good source.
Nick,
Yeah,
it's Richard. Will you allow me just to interject at this moment? You mentioned, can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us? Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, because I'm used to, okay. yesterday when you mentioned it, you began a little earlier, and I get what you're laying out, but you also suggested, I thought, which intrigued me immediately, that some of this was a sort of if there's some assumptions, I guess you have to make to understand this notion or quote unquote buy into it as being real, such as we're in this life experience at different levels, if you want, or different experience groupings in order to fulfill certain challenges or accomplishments. And then quote unquote, we'll go to the next one, we transition. And depending on what we're become aware of, to say it in just these kind of terms, in this life, that will influence, call it the next. And some of this grouping is taking place when unity is separating into what we call individuals for the purpose of what? Descending to this life experience. And in fact, I mentioned it a while back, and I just don't have the book. There's that wonderful Latin writer who wrote in the period of cholera or whatever it was. In the introduction to the book, he talks about he tells a story of young souls who are getting ready to come into this life experience, and they don't want to come. They have a close bond and understanding of each other. Just allow me to say it this way, because that's the way he says it. And they don't want to be separated. So there's a great tension that's part of the whole experience of, nope, you're going to descend or ascend or whatever, transition to this life experience and learn that you have certain things to accomplish, etc. So I think that was part of what interested me, the fact that before you're here, there might be a sense of a grouping, a sharing. In fact, I'm looking right now, you can go on, I'm on Bing, you can Google soul group, and you'll pretty much get the definition of kind of what you outlined, that soul groups refer to the belief that individuals have a group of souls with whom they have a deep connection and are meant to interact throughout their lifetime. So you could certainly apply that to Foundation and the people who stayed with Foundation over time, even when it's got a bit rough in the sense of what Nick just talked about. It's gone out of the usual concepts. But that whole thing just intrigued me. And I just thought I'd go a little backwards in explanation to help round out what that notion seems to encompass or include. And what other thing that struck me, and I don't know if it has any relation at all, was the biblical reference to when two or three are gathered together. That's a group. So are we talking about already the cosmology, the universe understands that a collective, a grouping has more, what word would I use? Authority, power, authenticity, possibility of effectiveness, etc. So even though you might go, quote, into your closet to pray, you also can come out, and there are groups all over the earth that meditate collectively, etc., 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 and find the experience very rewarding in terms of how they feel it's expanded their awareness and understanding of things. So that was all my question was sort of had all of that tied into it. And I didn't know if you were going to say, no, it's not that, it's another thing, and go from there.
Yeah.
I
May I
guess
ask the question? May I
Go ahead.
ask the question? I was listening to Richard talk in relationship to what you were saying earlier, Nick. What it sounds like to me also is that when we talk about the collective souls, we were talking about also the ancestors who are souls in the universe itself, that that we are in direct connection with, collaboration with, constant presence of. Does that speak to what you are referencing in any way, Nick?
Absolutely. And what my dad said is also very much connected, but there's a lot in there. And I believe in Kemet, the notion of, are you going to say some more?
I was done. I see. I'm done.
Oh, okay. And I believe in Kemet, the notion of the ancestor was, or the concept associated with the ancestor was, it was more so the idea of those who go before us. So not in the past necessarily, but those who are in front of us, those who go before us. And that was speaking directly to the nature of the fact that when you leave this spiritual body, you go back to the future, which is the past. But it's just there's a lot of things associated with that Kemetic spirituality that, of course, are misinterpreted in various ways as it de-evolves into a religious understanding of those original teachings. Another one is the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The translation, the more correct translation of that is the Book of Going Forth by Day, I believe. So there is a complete undoing of the confusion that we have been subjected to, that we are in the process of solving or trying to undo in a lot of ways. But let me address the things that you were talking about, Dan. So just to connect it to scripture, when we talk about that verse, I got it open right here. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. So there's a lot contained within that, but essentially, when you gather for the purpose of unifying your intention, essentially, when you gather for the purpose of getting on the same page, like we speak about, then that amplifies the effect of the energy you have access to as a group, as an individual. So when we talk about putting things in the macro, what we are attempting to do is, as a group, influence the nature of the energy that we all exist within, to influence the nature of the collective mind, the mind of the soul group that we interface with and we interact with. So it's where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name is, there's much metaphysically to unpack. Spiritually, it means where your intention aligns, your ability to accomplish a goal is accelerated. And that makes sense even in the physical. You get more than one person to do a job, that job gets done faster. It is a reflection of what we see in the physical, because it reflects, or we should say the physical is a reflection of what exists in the spiritual. But on a purely energetic level, when you gather with the similar intent, it amplifies whatever that intent is and your ability to accomplish the goal. And we have done that as a group more than once. There were certain times when we had overnighters. It's probably usually when we did that, where for whatever reason, the stars aligned, so to speak. Our intents were such that the energy that we produced was more potent than at other more sort of mundane, quote unquote, gatherings that we have had. It has to do with the nature of the consciousness that we are able to maintain. It has to do with the nature of the intent that we are able to align with each other. And all of these concepts, gathering together, 2 or 3 or more, as it says in the New Testament, maintaining a similar intent, aligning our intent, I should say. All these things are related to the true nature of the self and the ways in which we are connected, which relates to the concept of a soul group. And yes, we here at Foundation are very much part of a soul spirit family. We came here and met each other in order to accomplish goals, individually and as a collective group. And that doesn't necessarily mean we have to be physically family, of course, which most of us are not. Well, maybe. We might be 8th cousins or something, I don't know. But the point is that there are groups of souls with similar intents that come into this physical experience to accomplish similar things, or to accomplish the same thing by working together.
The question, Nick,
Yes, sir.
I see now what I see this. I see what you're talking about. I would assume that this is a principle that works whether or not you're seeking enlightenment or greed.
Yep.
You know, and what I mean by that is looking at the energy that has driven this world for all these centuries, all these thousands of years, sounds like a soul group. It is based on the same principle of wealth, greed, and domination. And that is, so are you saying then, if the intent is more for harmony and peace and love, the things that brought us together that caused us to be a soul group, that would be more harmonious, regardless of the lack of number? It's a smaller group, but it is a group that seeks enlightenment. So by recognizing this, and as you mentioned, the intent and our desire, that makes up, I would assume then, if I'm asking, I'm not going to make that assumption, a stronger soul group, right? Is that what you're referring to?
You are correct. There could be all kinds of intents that people have affinities for. Some of them are very negative. In generally speaking, the amount of people who have affinity for a negative intent that manage to come together to create that kind of metaphysical and spiritual momentum in the negative direction, is the amount of people is smaller. Though they can have a very powerful effect, as we well know. But when people come together with the desire to seek love, light, enlightenment, harmony, that effect is amplified to a much greater degree than the negative. And there is another metaphysical principle, which you may come across, called the law of squares. It's an energetic geometric principle. When you come together and you align your intent, when you align your energetic seeking, the effect is much greater in the positive direction than it would have been had you been trying to seek something negative. Because spirit, reality itself, the body of the creator that we exist within, is biased in the positive direction. And there's a metaphysical, spiritual reason for that. though it is entirely possible to choose the negative direction. Oh, what did I say? Spirit is biased in the positive direction, but it is possible to choose a negative direction. That is allowed. It is allowed by the Creator. That does not mean it does not produce horrible and chaotic experiences. It most certainly does, but it is allowed. Everything is allowed.
Well, Nicholas,
Yes, ma'am.
Nick, then, as you talk, I think about weapons of our warfare, are not carnal but are mighty, through the pulling down of strongholds. But when you talk about this law of squares, it says to me then that we should not hesitate to align ourselves with intent that is based on goodness and kindness and justice and peace, and because in so doing, what you're saying is the very nature and of our doing that and pulling from, if you will, just my word, from the cosmos. That's the nature of the cosmos. So the very aligning ourselves with that will overcome any of these negatives. It's much more powerful than these negative things. So we should not hesitate. We should not hesitate at all to do that, to align with goodness, to align with and to put that out there in the macro, to send that energy out there in the macro. Is that
Yes,
what
ma'am.
part of what I hear you saying?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Well, if I
the-
could.
Hang on one second. To align yourself in the way that I'm speaking with positivity, light, etc. It is more than to do so intellectually, which I'm sure we all know. And depending on the nature of the environment that we exist within, it can be more difficult to find the way to do that. It is a similar method, though. It is seek deeper within the nature of the self, within your own experience of self as a conscious being. Learn to let go of the noise, of the fear, etc., that you feel within yourself, and learn to listen for, well, actually, the better word would be feel for, the movement of the deeper nature of the self and spirit within. And it is that you seek out in attempting to bring it to the surface to make that alignment that much more strong. And as I said, that can be more difficult because it is not an intellectual thing. It is when somebody cuts you off in traffic, do you get mad? When somebody insults you to your face, do you get sad? Do you get mad? Do you get aggressive? Pay attention to the nature of your reactions and whether or not you are reacting or whether you choose to deal with those feelings, etc., that come up in a more positive way. That is what determines your alignment. It is not the thinking, quote unquote, in the regular sense. It is the nature of the feelings and the intent that you are able to focus on. And after a while, you don't even have to focus on it because it comes automatically. You automatically respond to seek what is deeper than the surface level sort of reaction that we usually have. And it's difficult. But it is that internal vibration that we must seek to cultivate, because it is that vibration that aligns all of us, that connects us and makes our ability to draw from each other as a soul group that much stronger. It is very challenging. And that is why we came here, to be challenged. And Dad, like you were speaking of, the notion that you chose to come here is very correct. One of the things that I've learned is nobody gets sent anywhere. You don't get sent to heaven. You don't get sent to hell in the religious sense. You don't get sent to this physical experience. You know you must come because you know there are things you must learn. And so you go. It's the same.
I hear you. I just lost the list, so I'm frustrated. So you
That's-
forget in your life, why? What am I doing? Yeah. I think Barb, even to what you said, which is why sometimes you think you're projecting or saying one thing and other people see it differently. That's the hard thing, right? That's why we say you have to go inside, because it's integrity. It's not should. Even using that word will drop away. We should be leaning toward, yeah, but you should and doing it to get there are different, or are night and day. I mean, it's all about the integrity, the honesty. But again, it's not a judgment. It's just you will do what the more you know of yourself, you'll be able to deal with. But you can't make yourself, right? You can, to a certain extent, for a certain period of time, be something. It has to ultimately come out of what's innate, if you want, in you, which is the connection you've found. Right? Is that?
If I think I get your meaning, we're all trying to make ourselves into more than what we mundanely think we are. But it is not a intellectual thing that we are lying to ourselves about. And the you is everybody involved in this process of spiritual growth.
Yeah, I think, Nick, this every now and then we come to a place where we need to pause and take an account of who we are and what we're doing. And this sounds like where we are again, where you need to be true to self, not be pretentious or
Yeah,
going,
don't lie to yourself about what it is you feel and think.
yeah,
Very
be
simple way
honest
to
about it.
to
Yeah.
put it.
But
So-
if I could
When you think, go ahead.
if I could tie that back, maybe, can we not tie that back in a little bit with the soul grouping, which is why sometimes when two or three are gathered together, you can be more honest about it if you're being honest with each other in that group. And you may discover that what you thought was honest in yourself isn't necessarily seen that way. So maybe it is a little different, because you can convince yourself of an awful lot that isn't necessarily substantive or real, which is why you can say you're a wonderful healer and do all these things, but nothing happens.
Yeah.
Because the connection just isn't there. I mean, I've met Reiki healers that they do it. And then I've met others that know all the techniques. So,
Yeah.
just an example, but it would be, yeah.
And that is why I generally stay away from quote unquote new age stuff, because it's mostly that. It's people who go through the motions and have a thin layer of some knowledge on top of a lot of emotional and mental regular chaos.
Yeah, that's my fear and what I see so much on the YouTube and the internet. Everybody is a prophet. Everybody knows the truth.
Right.
And they say it as if they've always known it. And it's so obvious. But you have to wonder what they do when they turn off the video.
Yeah.
Which
is why there
Maybe
are
I'm
many sources that are I consider very good. It doesn't matter. The teacher is you, your own spirit, your own experience. Make yourself into a true student. Otherwise, these will be as words to you. As the three initiates state. Every second of every day is an opportunity to observe yourself and don't think about that too hard. You don't have to every second be like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Just relax. It's difficult to intellectually describe. And if you get caught up in a cycle of thinking, you'll distract yourself from the real thing. Dad,
Ah,
as the
Oh,
avatar of thinking in the group.
but yeah, but what comes to mind too is it helps to have a wingman every once in a while who goes, wait, are you really saying this?
Yeah,
Because you can think you know what I'm trying to say? You can think you've got it and you're saying it right, but then if you have someone who's close to you
Knows.
emotionally or whatever, honestly, cares, that's the 2 and 3 to me, as well as maybe the synergy from 2 or 3. That can
Yeah.
help keep you, honest is a bit harsh, but just, you know,
yeah. The soul group.
why do your friends, you get together with your friends and they don't take everything you say, they ask you questions and they challenge you and they, you know, good, but you're your friends. It's all part of keeping you going in a good direction. And it helps them.
Yeah. It is. That's the purpose of the soul group. It makes it easier and it's mutual. So, any questions from telephone people who I can't see so far?
Yeah, I have a comment, and I want to see how you see this as part of the soul group, or if in fact it's consistent with what you're saying. From Spirituality Before Religion, it talks about the ancestors and says they are our eyes and our ears and our nose and our tongue and skin from the spiritual world. And we are ancestors' eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin in this physical world. And so together, we join forces and experience heaven on earth. How does that relate to the soul group experience?
The soul group extends beyond this physical plane. It involves those we would consider ancestors still now. It's just that this physical material experience is where spiritual work is done that much more quickly, which is one of the reasons we came here in the first place. So the ancestors are invested in our performance. We uplift and enlighten them when we evolve and enlighten ourselves spiritually here. It's a giant energy, spiritual feedback loop in a way. But the word I'm looking for is, I forget it. But it's more important for us to get it right than for the ancestors to get it right, because they're no longer part of this in the way that we are. Which they're still part of this, but it's, if you're on the field, you play the game. If you're sitting on the sidelines, then you may advise and you are still part of it, but you're not making the plays. You get what I'm saying?
Nick, I have a question. This is Evelyn.
Yes, ma'am.
Where do the children come in on this? Because to me, they're more spiritual. Well, I'm not going to say they're more spiritual, but they have less baggage than we do. So where do the children fit in with this?
The children are the future that we as adults are meant to learn from. The children come from the future. And we, in paying attention to the energy and spirit that they bring, are able to accelerate our own growth that much more quickly as a result of understanding them. If we reject that, what they bring, if we reject the youth, then we put on them that exact baggage that we were carrying. and it just makes the process that much more difficult.
So are they considered as our ancestors? Because it's like they
Yes.
know. You know what I
Correct.
mean? I see them as the ancestors, yeah. But now, you were talking about rejection. All the energy now goes into dogs and cats.
What did you talk about?
I'm talking about it's more about dogs and cats instead of children. Because I'm here at the park.
Oh.
Every time I come, all you see dogs. You never see cats. You never see children. That's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
There's a lot of reasons for that. Because fewer people want to have children. Because it's more difficult to raise children now than it should be. But anyway, that's sort of a different thing, or is related.
I
But,
know.
but yes,
But I appreciate the answer you gave us about the children being the ancestors. That's what I was thinking. But thank you.
Well, but I think it's interesting to make an analogy out of that. Because what's worrisome to me is the notion that being a parent is such a huge sacrifice. The experiences you have with your children, what's shared and how you can grow in that is, I don't know how otherwise you do it. Okay, maybe if you're sitting on a mountaintop meditating all that time, I don't know. So I think there's a misunderstanding too of that. It's too much obligation and not enough just expansive joy. And yeah, and I look back even with you or you and Steve and think, shoulda, coulda, had, oughta done these things, but you know. So, yeah.
yeah,
I guess one of the things that you said based on the question it made me think about the age of a soul that you how there was a book I read years ago about raising your children and how you don't want to curve them so much in the direction that you want them to go. You allow them to be themselves, but you just kind of guide them and you ask questions. And so you want to be a doctor. Why do you want to be a doctor? That sort of thing, not discourage it or whatever. But so you're looking at the soul. Part of that then is helping to develop that by not stifling and dominating the children, but allowing them to be the personalities that they were desired to be or born to be. And I just heard so much in that short little exchange you had with Evelyn there. Because there's a lot of things that probably happens in childbirth, and it's not intentional, but you know, we end up not allowing the children to be as expressive as they probably would be if they weren't forced to. You're going to do this or you're going to do that, and these are our values, and these are the values we're going to push on you. You know, and some of that is necessary, I know, but
Yeah.
that might be worth a conversation one day too.
Well, I think, Ron, the whole life experience, we're in this before we really fully understand or know ourselves and what to do. So of course you're going to make mistakes with your children. The
Yeah.
question is, I think, can you, and I think it applies to other things. Can you maintain an honest and loving relationship so that those things can be surfaced and put to rest? So they don't keep a certain energy in the life, let's say in particular, in this case, of your son or something, so they can go and be freer. But at some point, I know I did that, I shouldn't have, but if you can honestly forgive each other, work it out. But I think we do that with each other in so many things because we just don't recognize I'll say it this way, we don't recognize our perfection early enough, right? And so in the course of that learning, that's why I used to say we bump into people, we bump into each other, we connect, we interact where we are, the moment we are. Sometimes that's great, and sometimes maybe not so much. So I think it extends into the spiritual thing. It's all wrapped up in that too, really, to
Yeah.
me, but okay.
It is a challenge,
Yeah.
and challenge is how you grow. And growth is accomplished by knowing more about yourself than you did before. Speaking of children, that is how those who have gone before us, the ancestors, the as we have said, we are the Elohim. There are those who no longer have the need to come to this physical experience. We are the children to them. And it is as you say, Ron, like you can guide, but you can't control,
Yeah.
which is the double-edged sword of being present in this physical experience. We have to learn ourselves. And that means we can also mess up. But
Hey, but Nick, how about guys when we say to kids, when we listen to children, we say that they are old souls. How many times have we said that, you know?
yeah. Reincarnation, as we've spoken about, is another core spiritual metaphysical principle. There are certainly children, or in this case, maybe ancestors in the more literal sense, who have come back in order to be a part of this again, to continue the learning, to learn from their own children or from their own descendants. So it's absolutely possible for children to come, or us, to come here with a certain amount of baggage that we are still learning how to work out. Absolutely. But when we talk about generations of people in the earth, like millennials, etc., there are certain group characteristics for that group of souls, that soul group. And in that sense, they are the future, because we learn from that new generation. If we're able to deal with our own egos as the previous generation. At least that's how it's meant to happen. So I mentioned that everybody here, part of Foundation, absolutely. We are very much part of a soul family, a soul group. Spirits with similar intent who made the plan to meet with each other before we came to this physical experience. And that is how I believe it happens, and based on a bunch of sources that I trust as well as my own experience. This physical material experience is meant to teach us things by way of experience itself. And we learn from the things we experience. Emotionally, physically, all aspects of experience are meant to teach us how to deal with them, and in so help us to grow. And we plan for certain experiences before we come into this physical experience, into this material realm. We plan for certain experiences based on what it is we know we need in order to grow spiritually. We do that individually, and we do that collectively as a soul group. Now, one of the things that I mentioned, and that was mentioned, was the idea that in the process of creation, where the one thing, the Atum, could say split itself into many things as an expression of itself in a process of creation. That sort of splitting, the further down, quote unquote, closer you get to material experience is how that one thing becomes an infinity of things. And the soul group essentially represents a higher level organization of that one thing. So before it's split into even more pieces, that soul group is the before the split, more singular entity, if that makes sense. So the soul group is a reconstitution of the unity that existed before coming into this material experience. And again, the material experience is, as it is referred to, illusion. The infinity of separation is illusion. It is an infinity of unity expressed as multiplicity. So when we gather 2 or 3 in my name, etc., what we do is reconstitute a higher level, for lack of a better term, a higher order unity than when we were simply by ourselves individually. But that does not mean spiritual growth or enlightenment cannot be approached individually. It of course can. It is that much more amplified when a group of people can align themselves in terms of consciousness, in terms of intent.
But it's interesting that we even, there's so much you can pull out of the popular vernacular. I don't think we're aware of it. When we say kindred spirits, what are we saying? Right? So we have some awareness of this, even if we're not consciously quite,
Yes.
we don't quite know that we're saying it. And it can be, I'm sitting in South Carolina one day and I'm in Tibet. At another time, struggling to make communication with someone who speaks a different language, and something is there.
Yes.
That's my experience. But so,
Yep.
yeah,
Because that is the
it isn't-
instinctual remembrance of the true nature of things.
sure.
It comes out. It expresses itself. And it is more apparent when you look at groups of people, specifically because the individual is individually confused and chaotic in a certain way. But when you, in terms of the average of the group, there is a sort of underlying awareness that is not necessarily pinpointed on the individual level, but it is expressed on the group level in
Well,
terms
but
of
I think
averages and how this plays out.
you can look at it 2 ways, can't you? One, there's the synergistic effect, if you like, of a number of people like-minded, so to speak, being together, like foundation. And let's say there are 10 people, but the effect of that can be the equivalent of 15, just to give you an image. But it can also be scattered in places. It doesn't have to be everybody in South Carolina, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Scattered throughout the planet. So were you traveling, you could encounter a like-minded person if you had if you were open and had the opportunity somewhere
Yep.
else.
Right. It does not
Doesn't
have to
it-
be, you don't have to
yeah.
be physically next to
Right.
somebody. However, I will say that when you are, the experience is that much more amplified simply because of how we work. Human beings work psychologically. We see somebody, we're in their presence, we feel them, we hear them. We open up in ways that we generally, that is more difficult for us to do when they're not physically present. And that assists that same process. So yeah, you don't have to be physically next to them, but that definitely does help most of the time.
Nick, I definitely want to give you a chance to finish. Might be a good place to take a pause, but I want to show you something here. We keep talking about that scripture where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. We've been taught to believe that it's talking about physical bodies. 3 talks about seed. It talks about trees and being fruitful. 3 talks about revelation. It talks about resurrection. It talks about gathering balance and equilibrium, or counsel, or strength. So 2 or 3 gathering in my name is more of an infinity thing principle than we probably realize or stop to think about.
Yeah. No, I like
That,
that.
that just means so much more than probably what we thought about and when we looked at this before. So, you guys, is this a good place to pause though, and maybe pick it up Saturday?
Telephone people. I can go for another hour if you want me to.
Well, you guys will probably
I
go
think a
about
lot's
it. I
been
can't
said.
go. Huh?
I think a lot's been said, and some
Yeah,
of us need some
I think so
processing
too.
time.
Okay. Yes, you can watch this video once it gets uploaded. But yeah. Okay.
Good stuff though. Good stuff. Let's
Let me say one final thing. I
sure.
believe if we do another all-nighter at some point, then this is the topic that I want to come back to. And we can keep talking about it, but we say well, what it means to be on the same page, quote unquote,
Same wavelength, whatever, yeah.
same wavelength, what that looks like energetically, spiritually, in terms of intent, and what that does, and what that actually is. Because that is the direction we all are moving in terms of our spiritual destiny as a collective, as a big soul group, and us as a small soul group, part of the bigger one.
And sometimes I wonder, I know it's not the mission of this group. This is more, I don't want to just say educative, but I wonder sometimes, and it's something, certainly something I can do, let's say, to prepare for the session, to maybe meditate before. So particularly for an all-nighter, I would wonder if it wouldn't enhance if people came with a bit of preparation, meaning not memorization of this, that, or the other thing, but just to go back to you, Ron, a kind of mindset, although I think of it more profoundly than mind in that sense, more like soul preparation, an openness, a relaxedness. So when you came into the group experience, you were that much farther into what that time will allow.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I see what you're saying. Mindset to me is a pretty awesome thing when you think about it. Where are you? What do you value? What's that priority to you? But if you think about in the Old Testament, when you went to the Holy of Holies and you go through those gates, all of those were setting you, putting you in place. What is my intent? Where am I going? What is the purpose of this? So what do I represent as I move forward? So by the time I get to that place, I'm no longer Ron. I no longer represent Ron. It is not a selfish thing. So that's what I hear here tonight, as we talked about a meditation and being true to yourself and this because we're constantly on a journey. We're constantly moving, and that's what I like about this. I think it all of it gives us an opportunity to not improve individually, and I don't know another word but to say improve, and to grow closer and stronger as a group. But I think we're also at the place where we're seeing how to be action, not just absorbing, but how to be action, how to be the light that we talk about, and to recognize the things that we see, the eclipse, the whatever that we see, recognize what those things are, and even how to use those energies. So that's what I see, part of what I see anyway. And it opened me up to more questions, but anyway.
Thank you.
So
When we enter the Holy of Holies within ourselves, that is the place where all wavelengths, all intent, all consciousness is aligned and connected.
yeah.
And that is what I want us to try to do. So if we meet again at some point, whenever, I would like us to do some sort of group meditation, actually. But what I want to accomplish with that, what I hope to accomplish with that, I want to do myself first. And there's more I'm not explaining yet, but I do think at some point we should meet again to discuss these exact things. But anyway, I'll be here next weekend. I just mean in person if we ever get to do that again in the near future. That's what I
Okay.
want to talk about.
Good stuff. Thanks, guys. Thank you. All the questions and comments, and Nick, and thank you, and have a great week. Look forward to seeing you Saturday. Good stuff to meditate on, by the way. Carry this.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Have a good evening.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.